All right, so if you are a frequent viewer of Drive Home reviews, then you'll notice that there are certain patterns with me. Certain things that I like and certain things that I really don't like. And sometimes I come down hard on those things I really don't like, as we all do. You know, for instance, the films of Tom Cruise, you know, and Brad Pitt, and Julia Roberts, and Ryan Gosling, and Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler, Tina Fey, just about anybody who was ever a cast member on Saturday Night Live, now that I think about it. Look, I have exclusive tastes is the point. But the thing that I think I hate the most is the whole remake, reboot, recycle movement. Usually, I'd say 9 times out of 10, I feel like this is just a desperate cash grab to cash in on a well-known title without any real knowledge or understanding about what made the original so endearing in the first place. Now, it's not to say, though, that every now and then, maybe sometimes in spite of itself, a good one slips through the cracks. I'll give you an example. I am a huge fan of the original Planet of the Apes series. So a couple years back, when I heard they were going to remake it and use motion capture and Andy Serkis, I was understandably concerned. I still remembered the whole Tim Burton debacle. But despite all logic, those 3 Planet of the Apes remakes are actually really, really good. And sometimes a remake can outshine the original. I don't think those movies did. I'm just saying it is possible. And that's the subject of what we're going to be talking about today when we look at 1983's To Be or Not to Be, starring Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft, which is actually a remake of a Jack Benny vehicle from 1942. I also got to start by saying that this is going to be a much different experience reviewing this film as opposed to some of the other films that we've talked about here on Forgotten Gems, because a lot of those are films that are good but flawed, or maybe just need someone to stand up for them. You know, things like that. To Be or Not to Be is actually one of my all-time favorite movies. It's in my top 20. So I'm coming at this not as okay, we got to talk about this. You know, here's this thing you might not have heard of. Here's this thing that you might not have heard of that I fucking love. Okay? So let's just start at the beginning. Let's talk about what it's about. So To Be or Not to Be is about a Polish theater company led by the husband and wife team of Frederick and Anna Bronski, played by Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft. They have a theater in Warsaw just on the verge of World War II. As the movie opens, the narrator kind of tells us that, you know, the Nazis are kind of on the border and threatening to invade, which they eventually do. And now, through wacky hijinks and whatnot, the members of this theater company, with Mel Brooks in the lead, have to pull out all of these theatrical tricks, all the things that they know, and all of the elements that they've learned to catch a spy and then escape from Warsaw. So, I mean, there's other things going on, there's other details, but generally it's once again Mel Brooks having fun at the expense of the Nazis, which never gets old, in my opinion. And 2, it is a movie for theater people, because it is a movie about theater people outwitting Nazis. I mean, can you think of a better movie for someone like me? Because I have a hard time doing it. So let's get right to the crux of the matter. Again, a comedy is really hard to review. Talked about this with the basketball review, because again, what you find funny is such a subjective thing, and trying to describe moments that are funny, to me, don't always land. So, but let's just go with a basic, I think a universal truth. I stated it a second ago. Mel Brooks making fun of Nazis is always hysterical. There's no two ways about it. And here he gets to go even more than he really did with the producers, because here he actually impersonates Hitler himself. You know, before he had someone do it by proxy, here he's doing it. And yeah, what's funny about this one, and why I think this one often is not mentioned or talked about as much with the rest of Brooks's filmography, is that this is one of the few that he had, at least as far as I can tell, creatively, nothing to do with. His company produced it, but he didn't direct it, and he didn't write it. He must have done Punch Up, or the guys who wrote it must have been really good friends of his, because it sounds like a Mel Brooks joint. But it's not. This is one he is just acting in. So I think that's why it tends to get overshadowed a lot. It's not a parody of anything. You know, it's not a Blazing Saddles or Spaceballs or a High Anxiety. There's no genre that he's kind of, hitting it to. It's a straight up story. And it's a story that, of course, is a Mel Brooks comedy. So, of course, it's a bit over the top, it's a bit cartoonish, but it's also one that I think is dealing with the subject matter in a bit more serious a way than a lot of his films ever did. Like, it doesn't shy away from kind of the ugliness of what it was like living in occupied Poland for Jews, for homosexuals, for anybody. Yeah, they're joking about it, and yes, the Nazis that they go up against are very Hogan's Heroes Nazis, i.e., those funny, cuddly Nazis. Ho, ho, ho. So, but the threat of them is much more tangible in this film. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand. This is not, some documentary. It's still a Mel Brooks film. It's still a comedy. But I think it's more grounded in reality than a lot of things people normally associate with him. And I think that's what makes it even funnier. Speaking of funny, you gotta, Mel Brooks, of course, is a comedy genius. But this, I think, is some of his best work, and especially because he's working with Anne Bancroft, his actual wife. And a lot of husband and wife teams, the chemistry, I don't think, translates very well to the screen, in most cases. But here, boy, howdy, does it ever. They are just really good together. And I think part of what works, and I mentioned this again in the basketball review, is that Anne Bancroft, for the majority of her career, was a serious actor. So having her play kind of the straight man to him works wonderfully. She delivers lines with complete sincerity, and that makes them even funnier. And she is a perfect foil for him. A little bit more grounded, a little bit more down to earth, playing opposite, this kind of egomaniac character that he's playing. So the two of them are just phenomenal together. Really, the whole cast is outstanding. This film is filled with Mel Brooks compatriots and partners. George Weiner, who was in Spaceballs as Colonel Sanders, is in this. George, I cannot remember his last name right now. The gentleman who was the dad on Punky Brewster is in this. Charles Durning plays the head of the Gestapo, Colonel Earhart. And God, he's so funny. He is it's very Sergeant Schultz kind of Nazi. He's evil, but there's a cuddliness to him that, he's so inept that you're almost like, aw, he's a funny Nazi. Christopher Lloyd plays his aide, an actual Sergeant Schultz, who, his whole thing, again, kind of going with the Hogan's Heroes, Sergeant Schultz. He's like, I don't know anything about that. oh, I hear it's going to rain tomorrow. I don't know anything about that. Jose Ferreira is in this, which is odd because he again is not a comedy actor, and he's playing kind of the heavy. He's the spy that they're trying to catch, who ends up getting killed, and Mel Brooks then has to impersonate him. But Jose Ferreira is really good in this. He's good in everything, and he has a very distinct voice. I love Jose Ferreira's voice. It's just very distinctive and very deep and rich. Which is funny considering that Mel Brooks is impersonating him and has a much higher voice. But I guess, again, that just leads to the overall comedy of it. This is a film that I believe, when they were looking for something else, another Mel Brooks film to turn into a musical, they should have done this instead of Young Frankenstein. Now, I don't know if there's a rights issue or anything like that. And also, it just doesn't have the name recognition of Young Frankenstein. But let's be honest. The Producers is an outstanding Broadway musical. It was tailor-made to be on Broadway. Young Frankenstein, I don't, put aside how much you might like one of the songs, or maybe you've been in it, but let's be honest, it is not as good. It is not as strong, because it just doesn't have that Broadway vibe to it. This one does. This one takes place in a fucking theater. There's like 5 really great songs in this movie that you could expand on, and boom, you got 5 songs already for the Broadway version. I would love if they did a Broadway version of this film. And something else I'm usually against is all these movies becoming musicals out of nowhere. But this one actually, again, it almost is a musical. It has musical numbers in it, much like the Producers. And that's another thing. I think another reason this film speaks to me, and why, if you are a theater person watching this, it'll probably speak to you in the same way things like Waiting for Guffman did. And that is, Mel Brooks is a child of the theater. He has a deep love and a deep respect for the theater, which is odd because in most of the things I've seen or heard about him, he didn't do a lot of theater. He was a movie maker. But so much of his work is just marinated in those classic musicals and that classic Broadway feel. And he has an understanding for the characters that inhabit the theater, the bigger-than-life personalities, and yet the fragility within those characters. This movie, in terms of a Mel Brooks film and a Mel Brooks performance, one of the characters has an actual arc. It's a small arc, but it's an arc. So the character of Frederick Blonsky, played by Mel Brooks, is, of course, this ham actor. He believes too much of his own hype. All the other characters are always making jokes about how he stinks, but doesn't think he does. And his favorite thing to do is highlights from Hamlet, where he goes out and does To Be or Not to Be. And it takes him like 10 minutes to get through it because he's milking it so much. And as part of the story, as he's doing this performance, twice, this soldier gets up in the middle of his performance and leaves. Now he's getting up to go have a secret rendezvous with Blonsky's wife backstage, but that's beside the point of the character arc I'm making. So his confidence is completely shot. Comically, we don't really get a big scene of him, I'll never run to it. But you get that his confidence is kind of shot, that somebody walked out on him twice. So you're dealing with an actor actors coming as one, so I feel I can say this, are such an odd, divisive little group with such a duality to personality, and that rhymes, that they have the biggest egos in the world and the most fragile. if not sent with constant praise, they whimper and cry and go to pieces. 1 million people can say that the performance is good. One person says it's bad and they can't handle it. What a bunch of just emotionally unstable people. Please leave a nice comment now. Anyway, however, I digress. So you have a character who is kind of at his lowest professionally, and now he has to call on those acting skills, which he is not entirely positive of anymore, to fool Nazis, to fool the Gestapo. Now again, all of this is very subtle. This is not a big, huge, dramatic piece, but it is there. The arc is there. And it leads to, this movie has two of my all-time favorite lines in it. And the first is when he comes back after fooling the Gestapo the first time, and it's a long stretch, there's a lot of people he has to trick, and after doing it, he comes home, and, he's like, honey, I did it, I fooled them. And everybody's asleep, so there's nobody there. And he kind of sits in this chair, and he's taking off the makeup, and he goes, I did it. I gave the greatest performance of my life, and nobody saw it. And I can relate heavily to that. I've done that. I think we all have. You see somebody after a long time that you haven't seen in years and you don't really like, or you're not really excited to see, and you're like, oh wow, hey, it's great to see you, oh my god, you look so wonderful, and all that. Or you go for a job interview and you're really trying to put on your best face, and it's exhausting and all of that, but I've had those moments where I kind of slumped down after something like that and went, I just gave the greatest performance of my life and nobody saw it. And I think that's what leads to another big point that why I love this movie so much. And again, why I'm encouraging any theater folk watching, if you haven't seen this, you need to go check it out because it's a movie for us. It has another kind of, again, I don't think this was implied or this was intentional. This is just something I picked up on or something I found as I watched this movie. The film critic Movie Bob says in one of his Really That Good reviews that the most comforting words in the English language are, you are already doing the right thing. And that a lot of movies are built on the fantasy of what you are doing, the way you are is exactly what we need to accomplish this goal. It's a catharsis. It is a living vicariously through, however you want to say it. And for me, this movie is. Acting theater is such a difficult art. And it's one of those arts that most people, I think maybe only painters are the ones, who maybe get it as much as we do. But it's that art that most people kind of go and look at, and they all say that same thing in the back of their head, well, I could do that. But nobody really takes into account how much time and effort and study and work most of us have put into it. I can speak for myself and say, generally speaking, it took me an undergrad degree and then working professionally for a few years, and then 3 years of a graduate program, and then working professionally again after that. So a lot of it is schooling, a lot of it is on-the-job experience training to develop these skills that I'm very proud of. But as I'm constantly reminded every faculty meeting, these are not skills that translate a lot to the real world. They are skills, you know, I'll do my Liam Neeson. They are a very particular set of skills. I can't use my sense memory to fix my car. Okay? I can't use emotional recall to take a math test. Alright? The skills you learn in the theater are applicable to one place and one place only. The theater or bullshit criticism like this. So this movie gives me that wonderful fantasy of, hey, you know those skills that you've learned? You know those things that you're really good at? Well, they are exactly what these people need to get out of this situation. And it's one of those, again, it's a very cathartic film for me in that regard. I'm gonna, before I get into kind of on the other hand, or the, you know, is this film perfect? I gotta say one other thing. I gotta talk about my favorite line in this movie, and one of my favorite lines ever. But it's a Mel Brooks line, so I can't say it exactly. I just can't. He can get away with it, I can't. So I'm gonna clean it up a little. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because it's a funny line to me, and the other one is it's so inappropriate. So yeah. Anywho, so he comes home. He's been at the German censorship board, and you know, he's getting into bed. He's like, "Oh, honey, I've been there all day with those German censors. They want us to cut the gypsy number. Apparently, they don't like gypsies either. Oh, let's face it, sweetheart. Without Jews, gays, and gypsies, there is no theater." I'm sorry, I love that fucking line because it's true. Most of theater's origins and most of the great art came from one of those three groups of people. It is fact. You know? So yeah, it's a great line. Of course, he just delivers it in Mel Brooksian perfection. So is this movie perfect? No movie is perfect, but again, we're talking about one of my favorite movies here, and there's not a lot to really nitpick about it, to be completely honest. I think maybe it could use a little bit more emotional payoff. So the big emotional thrust of the story is, like I said a little while ago, his wife is having a fling, not even an affair, with this young pilot. We're never really given a reason why. I think, you know, you get the feeling it's just kind of, for her, just a middle-aged flirtation kind of thing. But it's this emotional thing that drives a lot of why Mel Brooks goes and does what he does. You know, he impersonates this character to go save her, or he's doing it because she asked him to, you know. And there's never really a reconciliation scene between them. There's a small little one. But we never get a scene of her kind of once again seeing him for the man he could be, or the man he really is behind all the ego and the pompousness. We don't really get a scene like that. I think emotionally it might have been nice just to have a quick scene like that in there. But again, this movie moves at such a clip. Like, it is paced brilliantly. It's a comedy. And they're not wasting time with a lot of that. They want to get to the next joke and the next setup. That's what this movie is. Set up for the joke, deliver the joke. So I understand why that's not in there. I'm just saying it might have been nice. The only other thing I can say is that you gotta take into consideration 1983. You gotta take into consideration Mel Brooks. And yes, there is a gay character in this film, and it is a very stereotypical gay character. I have a hard time wondering if this is offensive or not, because again, straight white male, I think the character is funny, really funny. And, despite some of the jokes that are made, they care about this character. He's part of the theater community. They go to great lengths to save him when he's arrested, because he's gay. So it's one of those poking fun at, but not, it doesn't feel like a mean-spirited kind of thing, at least to me. Now, again, I don't know how other people would react to this. Basically, if you're okay with the gay characters in The Producers, you're going to be okay with Sasha in this. But it is one of those things that, especially these days, you get a little skeezed out because you're like, okay, Mel Brooks making Jew jokes, you can kind of go with because he's Jewish. So you're like, okay, that's fine. Making the gay jokes, there's still that kind of... So, I don't know. I don't feel that way, but I can understand how other people would. But other than that, there is literally not a lot or anything I can bitch about in this movie. It is funny as hell. It has all sorts of different jokes, visual gags, dialogue-based humor, over-the-top performances, straight-edge performances. Like, it's a great mixture, and everything blends together so very well. And you can tell it's rehearsed. There's a lot of stuff in here that there is just some excellent old-school vaudeville timing on, and you can tell they practiced this. I think it is a theater person's, a theater person's dream. So if you are a theater person and you have not seen this film, I'm urging you, go seek it out and check it out, because it is a love letter to us and the job we do in the world we come from. So yeah, that's To Be or Not to Be. Great movie. All right, so folks, we're trudging on. Apparently, I've got at least a month left of this, so we're not going to get down. We're going to keep calm and soldier on, and there's lots more forgotten gems to go through, and we're going to go through them. So thank you for joining me, and until next time, drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies.